Anyway, congratulations. I'm here with Santiago Giraldo, who is the Chief Financial Officer of Tecnoglass, which is a Barranquilla-based manufacturer of glass and aluminum products. They're very active with the majority of their sales and business activity taking place in the U.S. They're export oriented. They trade on NASDAQ. The symbol is TGLS. So I wanted to talk to Santiago because congratulations, you guys showed surprisingly strong results for the second quarter of this year. If you could tell us a little bit about how you guys achieved that.
Yeah, we were very pleased with the results. Obviously, a challenging time, especially in Colombia, where we had, 3-4 weeks of less work because of the shelter in place that was put in place by the Colombian government at the end of March. So this quarter in particular, we had 2 less weeks of invoicing during April. And even with that, we basically were able to achieve almost as much operating margin and EBITDA as last year with lesser revenues. The revenues are basically backlog that is in hand, so that's just going to move over to Q3 or Q4. So in reality, to us, that's just not like business that goes away. Our impact has more to do with timing rather than lost revenues, which is encouraging. But what you saw in Q2 is that our investments in automation during last year and also putting in place efficiencies that we worked on during the second half of 2019 are paying off. So we were very, very pleased with the margins, with the cash flow generation of the business. And to tell you the truth, being exposed to the U.S. market, 97% of our revenues came from the U.S. in Q2. Helped a lot because construction was deemed as an essential business in the U.S. and 50 out of 54 states never stopped construction activity. So that was really, a huge advantage because, as you know, Colombia and LATAM as a whole continues to be challenged. And, we were able to ramp up production and be ready to operate safely. But that's not necessarily the case with our clients. Some of these job sites are just slow to ramp up and be ready to operate. So, LATAM is slowly getting back to its feet, but the U.S. never stopped. And that continues to be, by and large, our main market.
Great. And you already answered one of the questions that I had, was that you guys have had record margins, both gross margins and operating margins. And so it sounds like those efficiencies that you put into place. I visited the factories that you have. They're very efficient, well run, lots of automation already in place. So it's not like you have to play catch up or pay off any technological debt. You guys have ever since I've been aware of the company, run a very technology forward company. And when it comes to automation, both in the computer and software side, as well as automation in the manufacturing side as well. So you guys did close the factory down, if I remember, for a few weeks as a safety measure to protect your workforce. And I don't think that, as I understand here in Colombia, manufacturing and exports were considered essential industries. So you didn't have to do that, but you just decided to do that anyway, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, it was the right thing to do. Obviously, our employees is what matters most. And at that point in time, it just didn't make sense to continue operating as if nothing had happened. Obviously, the priority has always been the safety of our employees and their well-being. So we took those 3 weeks to adapt the factory to basically work under the safest of standards. We implemented a ton of different safety measures to mitigate the risk. Luckily, Barranquilla, is much better now than it was a month or 2 months ago, where we experienced that peak. Daily cases has subsided significantly, but we continue to operate as safe as we can. To us, it was really not a question. Like I was saying, our backlog is in place. We have operational capacity. We were able to catch up with orders once we resumed in the latter part of April. So it was a matter of doing it right. It was a matter of investing in safety and investing in our employees and doing the right thing.
Great. That's good to hear, and I was surprised and impressed when I saw you all take that move. Now, how has that affected, or the pandemic in general affected the joint venture that you have with Saint Gobain at all?
Well, we continue to move forward with all the permits. As you know, there are several things that need to happen before you can start construction: land permits, water permits, the communities, everything else. So we're not at a standstill. We continue to move forward with everything. So we are ready to kind of break around when the time comes. From a strategic perspective, that what we're doing right now is assessing with Saint Gobain when the right time will be. What we do not want to do is go ahead and incur into a lot of costs to import all the machinery and everything else related to the project if we see that demand is going to be slow to catch up, right? So, remember that Saint Gobain already has a plant in Colombia where we are 26% owners. That plant is operating at full capacity today, so that's encouraging. We just want to make sure that we're not cannibalizing if we basically open up a second plant that is not going to be at capacity at the right time. So we are assessing market conditions. We're waiting for better visibility as to what transpires with all of this COVID situation. We want to make sure that the demand for architectural glass in the regions where we are targeting are going to continue to be there, and just doing it right. I mean, we want to be sensible. We want to be responsible with this investment and make sure that at the end, the return for the shareholders is going to be adequate.
How has all countries right now, I think, are probably technically in a recession. But one thing in Colombia with most of the foreign exchange coming from petroleum, we have a depressed peso right now. I imagine that as an export-oriented company, that has had some benefit for you in the recent months.
Significant benefits. I mean, as I was saying, 97% of our sales in the second quarter were into the U.S. So imagine all of those U.S. dollar denominated revenues against probably 40 to 45% of our local cost and expenses being in Colombian pesos. It just makes us a lot more competitive. Obviously, what you want to assess is what that means for the situation of Colombia as a whole, for its economy, for inflation, for GDP growth. So you want to balance, but right now a depressed peso is beneficial for our P&L. It just favors the way that our cost structure is laid out. We expect to continue growing our U.S. dollar denominated revenues, and obviously a large part of our cost structure is going to be in Colombian pesos when we have 100% of our manufacturing capacity in Colombia.
Yeah, it makes sense, and so it seems that we don't see petroleum prices or even the peso rebounding in the near future. In fact, one thing that concerns me living here in Colombia is that the government has had to take a lot of measures to not just prop up the economy, but to offer humanitarian support to the citizens, and that has put a strain on government resources and those fiscal challenges that are out there. We see that the tax revenue into the government is down as much as the petroleum royalties are down, and so because of that, we probably won't see the peso rebound very quickly. And while that's not so good necessarily locally from a humanitarian perspective, it probably does help Tecnoglass financially, I would imagine, if we look out over the next few quarters.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, for our business model, it would be very beneficial. I believe markets are efficient, and what we see as an FX rate today already reflects what you're mentioning, the fiscal challenges moving forward and lower oil prices. I do think that a large part of what's happening with FX rates has to do with volatility, with uncertainty, with the psychology of what could happen with COVID. So I do think that if we see a vaccine or we see a short-term resolution or a strong move in the right direction regarding COVID, I would expect the peso to appreciate a bit. But from a structural perspective, you're right. I mean, the fiscal challenges that we have, we're going to have a tax reform next year, without a doubt, are going to keep the peso on a depreciated level. That's beneficial to our business.
Now, you guys also have a U.S. subsidiary. You guys made an acquisition several quarters ago that gives you not just, you already have had the U.S. being your primary market, but now you guys have feet on the ground, so to speak. And so, how is that? How is your subsidiary there in suburban Miami performing, and how is that integrated and helping you all as you continue to grow into the North American market?
It's been instrumental to the story. I mean, if you look at our results over the last 5, we have almost tripled our sales into the U.S. That is a very large market. By our calculation, about 30 billion in revenues per year, and we're selling about 350 million. So we're 1.5% of the market. Obviously, not necessarily everything is addressable, but the opportunity is much larger than what we have today. And if you look at the story over the last 3 years, we have made a push into single-family residential, which is growing exponentially, going from 7 million in sales in 2017 to about 75 to 80 that we're expecting for 2020. So we have grown that segment 10 times over the last 3 years. And in large part, that is a result of having the adequate infrastructure for distribution, installation into the U.S. So that's played out very well. That's central part of the strategy. We want to continue diversifying from a geographical perspective, moving away from the Southeast where we were concentrated and more into the Northeast, the West Coast, Texas, Chicago, and other places. So the opportunity is much larger. I think that even under a challenging scenario where you may have contraction in construction being put in place, we have an opportunity to maintain our share and gain some. As we move forward, we'll continue to invest in that development, not only from a geographical perspective, but also from an asset type perspective, diversifying into residential from commercial.
That's good to hear, because you'll see different, and I have a background. I was a commercial real estate agent in the U.S. for some time, and you see different cycles between. They do have correlation and they are tied together, but they don't run perfectly in sync. The commercial construction industry with the residential. Residential tends to lead in some cases because you develop a residential area and then the commercial follows. Then you have the office market. Obviously, that's a different thing. But it's interesting because I remember thinking one time and talking to my wife and saying, "Wow," you said, let's build a house." And I said, "Well, I thought to myself, if we do, I want some of that energy efficient low E glass that Tecnoglass makes." But at the time, I thought, well, they don't do residential; they do commercial. But now knowing that, and I think a lot of that's just marketing to the awareness to make sure that the market understands that the product is out there and available and its value proposition. I imagine that for your sales and marketing, that's also a new challenge because you have to go after the architects and the builders and the developers, and that's a new audience that you're opening up to. Because if the commercial developers know about Tecnoglass, and you guys have so many trophy properties in the U.S. that you've done, and here in Latin America, to be able to reach out to those residential developers and architects and builders as well, to let them know about that. Now, is there anything that you guys have put out a lot of positive information? I had a chance to go over your results. You guys paid a dividend at the end of July. Is there anything that either I have forgotten to ask you or anything new that you want to add? I want to be sure not to leave anything out. There's a lot of news. It's been an eventful year for everyone, but at least fortunately for Tecnoglass, a lot of the the news that has come out has been very positive, and so I wanted to give you a chance to address anything that maybe I have forgotten to ask.
No, I think you have, and I think our story and our business model is somewhat different than what you see with a lot of other industries out there. We have a backlog in hand that is getting executed. So for us, the next 12 to 18 months is pretty much played out on the commercial side. And on the residential side, we've seen sequential growth month over month since this whole COVID situation started. So that looks to be promising. We're very positive, and if you look at what's taking place in the U.S., housing is one of the bright spots. I mean, we have all-time low mortgage rates, 0% raised by the Fed, and there's just a ton of money that has been put into the system. So I think we're more positive than kind of like the broader community. I believe that we're gonna, go to a new normality. I think, economies are not gonna shut back down again. I think we're gonna have to learn with this in the meantime until a vaccine is found. But I think that's gonna get us ready to kind of fully utilize what we have built. I mean, we've invested quite a bit in automation and capacity and being ready for a much bigger picture. So I think once we get over this hurdle, we'll be ready to continue the story.
One last thing I want to ask you about, and I don't want to put you on the spot because I've noticed, because I follow the company closely and I'm here in Colombia, and Tecnoglass has not made any noise about it. They haven't put out press releases. They haven't said anything about it. And I don't want to scare you. You're probably like, what is he going to talk about now? But you guys, during the pandemic and when everything was shut down strictly here in Colombia, I noticed that the leadership of Tecnoglass, the Dias brothers, and you all of you all who are leaders in the company, really went out and on your own and very quietly did a lot of things to support not just your employees, but then also the wider community there in Barranquilla and in Atlántico, to help people. I saw some things that you guys did that got very little coverage, and I think that's because you guys didn't want coverage. And so I don't want to embarrass you, but I do want to point out that you guys really went above and beyond and weren't doing it for marketing reasons, but you guys really have a social aporte, like we say in Spanish. But you guys really went out and did some things in the community to help out. And I want, if you could tell us a little bit about that, because that's important.
Yeah, and you know what? This is not something new. I mean, to you following the company, you know how invested the Dias family and Tecnoglass through its foundation, how supportive they've been over the years, not only in Barranquilla, but its surroundings. So this is part of the DNA, really. I mean, this is part of our business model or our sustainability efforts. We've created the foundation for that purpose. So it couldn't have been any different this time around. I mean, this is as dire as it's gotten, as much of, how much the community would need our support. So it's not something that you want to go out and ask for a trophy for. I mean, it's part of what we do, and it couldn't have been any different. I think those companies, those entrepreneurs, and the people that ended up in the better end of this whole mess are the ones called to help out. So it's not something that you do for marketing purposes. It's something that you do because you truly believe in the support that the community needs. I mean, Tecnoglass wouldn't be the same without this community. I mean, we owe who we are to our employees. There's 5,000 families that the company provides for and that help us get where we are. So yeah, it's not a marketing stunt. I mean, it's just part of the story. It's part of the DNA. It's part of what the Dias family has been for a long time. It's part of our foundation. So, I don't think it's something that is necessarily tied to COVID. Is more of the long-term story of the company. So, it was our call to go out and try to contribute as much as we can.
really good to hear. I am, I've been really impressed, and I wanted to bring that up because you guys don't bring it up on your own. You guys quietly just go out there and do what you think is right. But I think that it deserves attention because you're doing it for the right reasons. I know you're busy, a CFO of a publicly traded company. I thank you for your time. It's always good to hear from you, and hopefully, once we are able to travel safely again, we can do a next interview in person. So, Santiago Giraldo, CFO of Tecnoglass, trades on NASDAQ, TGLS. Thanks again for your time.
Thanks, Loren. We'll talk soon.
Okay, stay safe.
All right, you too.
Okay, goodbye.